And we should be live and okay, perfect. We are live. Let's see if our audience can hear us now.
Maybe let's wait for some feedback from them before we start.
Let's see. Okay, we have people online with us, and I have the feedback that it works on
Cool.
YouTube. Amazing. So then we should welcome people again. And Carol, can you say again what you said for the intro?
Yeah, so hi everyone, welcome to this session. My name is Karol Michałek, and I'm a test engineer with Spyrosoft. I have probably close to 10 years of experience working with test automation, and a few of those years I've spent working with Froglogic Squish for Qt. And this will be the tool that I will be talking about today. When it comes to the topics, I think I would like maybe to show some of the things that I would want someone to show me when I was first starting with Squish. So it might be that when it comes to improvements that you can introduce to testing, I feel like you can do come at it from two sides. One of the things, you can improve your testing tools by creating more efficient and standardized testing tools. So I would like to show how you can maybe improve some basic Squish functions and make them a part of your framework to make the testing more streamlined, more standardized, and easier to maintain. And on the other hand, when it comes to improvements, the output created by test frameworks and the tests themselves often is viewed not only by testers, but also by developers, by product owners, or other various stakeholders. And because of that, I think there's a lot of value in improving the quality of that output, making it more much easier to read, easier to understand to people who might be outside of the testing domain and not have a lot of the knowledge on the topic. And if the testing tools and the output they provide is prepared with this in mind, then it doesn't fall to like individual testers to make sure that this output will be understandable to everyone. So since we're running a little bit behind on time, maybe I'll just start with sharing my screen. I will be working using a virtual machine based on Ubuntu, and I will be using an application called Thermostat. This is a free application that's available from the Qt creator. It's one of the demos that everyone can build for themselves and see how that works. It has a lot of different controls and tabs, so I think it's a pretty good example of how that works. But the first thing that I would like to start with is that I believe that if you can, you should work using some kind of a virtualization. There are a few reasons for it, but the main one that I would like to highlight here is that when it comes to Squish or like any automation that tests, for instance, desktop application, they tend to steal your inputs. So this is a really simple test case. This test case, all it does, it will start this application. It will enable our controls, and it will check in the other tab for some other control. So if I run it now, that's exactly what it does. But as you can see, the IDE is gone. I cannot use it currently. And of course, the test case, I cannot really interact with the desktop too much because I might affect it, right? And if you are working within a virtual environment, you can actually use a different IDE. that connects to virtual machine, for instance, using SSH, and continue your work. In this example that I've shown, of course, the test case is rather simple and short, so it's not a huge cost. But for instance, if you would like to run an entire suite to maybe see if your tests are stable, and that suite takes some time, that is basically if you're working with Squish installed on your main machine, that is a time basically wasted. So with the setup that I've mentioned, I can continue work in the outside IDE that is connected to this virtual machine via SSH, and the test case just runs freely in the background. The Squish itself also allows for running the test cases from the command line. So if you would like, there's also a possibility to not only connect to the to your files using SSH, but also to Squish itself and running the test case without having even to interact with the virtual machine. So in my opinion, this is a good time saver and it should be used. But for the remainder of the session, I will be using the Squish IDE. Of course, the IDE itself, there are pros and cons, of course, to using a third-party IDE. As you can probably tell, Squish IDE is quite outdated. It's based on Eclipse. I'm not really sure, but probably close to something like 2008 in origins. So it's pretty outdated, and having tools provided by newer IDEs is really valuable. But of course, the IDE itself has things that no other IDEs provide. For instance, the picker tool, which is of course used a lot in trying to figure out the structure of the application. And this is the second thing that I would highlight. It's worth doing whenever you're starting testing with Squish. Just get a picker tool and try to maybe go through the structure of your window. See what items fall into what category, which are how they are how the hierarchy of the items looks, because that will make it in the long run easier to write test cases later. The second thing that I think I would want to highlight is the fact that the default way of running the application that the Squish uses is the launching the application. So every time I start the test, the application would launch from the start. So for instance, in this test case, it will do these 6 steps, and then it will switch to the other tab. And I have created a really simple test example here. All that it does, it starts the application. Let me just update this here, and then it will look for the for this button. The Squish itself uses object map to identify items present in the application. I have added quite a few objects that are here using this basic function that the IDE provides. I'm not going to go that deep into the object map itself. I think it's a candidate for a whole separate session. But for now, let's say like most of my objects are in the object map. So all that I'm going to do in this session, in this test case, I'm going to start the application, and I'm going to see that my rooms button is present here. Yeah. So this is a really simple test case. It doesn't really report anything back. All it does is wait for the object, and the default behavior for Squish functions is to throw an exception if the object is not found. So since the application has, since the test case has finished without issues, that means that that the application was there. Yeah, so the main difference, the main issue that I have with this basic approach is that you have to go over your entire test case every time. So in my first example, the test case clicks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 checks, and then it goes to a second tab.
Carol, if may interrupt you for a second, we have a
Please do.
comment from our audience saying that maybe we can make the fonts still a bit bigger.
Okay, we can try for sure.
Thank you.
So let's maybe increase that. Of course, font is here.
Hey,
Would
this is
20
still
work?
part of the webinar. Now we know how to increase fonts. Yes, I think this should be fine.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yes.
So the test case itself is somewhat irrelevant, but let's imagine that I have a problem, some kind of a problem here, and just to show it, I have created a fake item for myself that will make sure the test case will fail, right? So in this instance, if I will run the test case with the item that I'm not expecting here, not expecting to be here, I have to again wait for it to finish. It does all of these starting steps, and then it will fail eventually, because the default timeout that this Squish function uses is quite lengthy. I think it's probably like 10 or 15 seconds. But you can imagine that if you would want to do some troubleshooting here, it would take probably every try would take some time for these options to finish. That's why I prefer to just for the development using an attaching to application, because Squish allows you to attach to an application that's already running, and to be able to do it, you have to start this application from this Squish runner. I have a really simple bash script here. All it does, it basically calls the start out functions from Squish on the application, my application, and specifies the port that it should set up for Squish to connect to. And if I do that, the application starts the same. But now it will allow me to attach to it in any moment I want. So I can basically go to the second tab, which is the last step that I had, and I can just temporarily disable all of this. And if I want to just test this step, if I run the test case now, it will go straight to this entire step. Yeah, now let me cancel it, and so we won't have to wait for 15 seconds. But this way you can basically bypass a lot of the steps that's not needed. When it comes to performing the tests, the approach to have the application started from scratch every time and attaching to already existing application, both have their pros and cons. But I think for the development side of things, this feature really allows you to save a lot of time. Yeah. So coming back to our simple test case, as I mentioned, the default timeout is rather lengthy. So you can of course introduce the timeout parameter to the function. For instance, if it's in milliseconds. So in this example, if I run the application now, it will time out after 2 seconds, and of course the result will be. Forgot to close the previous one. Result will be much faster. But of course, we do not want to do this to every call to this testing application. So maybe we can see how this can be improved on. So what I have here is basically a really simple wrapper on the wait for object function. It takes object name and the timeout value as a parameter. I've set it to default 2 seconds because in this application everything is basically loaded from the start, so there's no need to extend it. If when it comes to, as I mentioned, to output provided by Squish, if wait for object function fails, it throws an exception. I think that this might be misleading to someone looking into the test report because the exception sound like something that the framework itself might have caused. So I personally prefer to for the test case to only have the option to result in a pass or a fail, and the exceptions should be made exclusive to the failures of the test cases, the tests, or sorry, the test framework itself. So in this scenario, I wrap up the basic function. So when it fails, with object not found, it returns a lookup error. And if we caught this error, we just return none from this function. But I still think that the information in the lookup error is valuable, so I put it into a test log. Of course, if any other exception arises, we want to raise it. Otherwise, if there were no exceptions, that means that the function has completed successfully. We will return the object. So by basically adding some additional information, let me start the application again. I will be using attach for the remainder of the session because that's just faster. If our function, we've basically created a simple test here, right? So if our function does not result in a none, that means that the object was found, and otherwise, we should fail the function. And of course, if I run it now, the object was found, and the test completed in a pass. But if you look at the test case created here, it becomes kind of apparent that the only thing that changes that can change here is actually the name of a button. So that's really a good candidate again for a testing function for a really simple wrapper. So we can just create ourselves a function, let's call it a presence check. And of course, we will require an object name from the object map. And we can add a timeout as well, because if we're looking for an object that might appear after some time, the timeout might be valuable. Let's set it to default as well. And basically, if we replace our object name with the parameter, and we introduce it to, let's just rename it, and we introduce it to the string we have here. We get a testing function. So the presence check that will log the information for the object that it looks, and right underneath it, either pass or fail. Now that when you look at it, when you think, of course, we're failing the function because object lookup resulted in an object not found, and object lookup can be used in other places as well. So why not just put the failure here? And that is possible to do. We can just do it right here, so we don't have to even check for the failure happening in our presence check. So with the core search function being there, and first testing function being done, we can again look at this testing function and try to find a way of maybe reusing this code again. Because if we have a presence check and we want to check for object being within the application, we might also need to check for its absence. So if you look at the function itself, again, it passes if the object is returned, it's not none. So if we basically reverse it, remove the timeout, because if we want to check for the disappearing object after some time, that's a little more complex to do. But if you're looking for something that should already be gone, the timeout will not be needed. We can basically do this, and in the other case, of course, we can fail our test and say that our object was present. So in theory, this works, but there is one issue with the code that present, and that's actually the change that we have made before. It was that we have a test fail whenever a lookup error happens. So in this case, before this none is returned, we would have a test fail. And of course, we could have left that failure in here in the presence check, but situations when we will want for our object to be here, or where we want to fetch an object from the application, outweigh the situation from my experience when we're looking for the absence part. So whenever you want to do any operations on an object, you would want to fail the test case if this object is not found. If this fail will not be present here, every single testing function that will rely on the object will have to implement the check for it. So I think it's actually easier to introduce another parameter to the lookup function. I would call it maybe just mute, and we set it to false so it doesn't change anything by default. And then we can mute our function based on this parameter. So for the presence checks, this will change nothing, because by default the mute is false. But if for object lookup, we will we will introduce it like that. Then we basically should be able to have two working functions. And let's see if those functions will work. So now we will do a present check. Let's just grab an object name from map, and our rooms button will be fine, I think. And right after it, we can do absence check. And as I mentioned before, I've created a fake item. So right now, this application, I will try to run the test. And we can see that we got the pass from this first test case, and the failure that we're not supposed to see. Of course, I have made a mistake somewhere. Let me just get a second. Of course, there should be this should be reversed, because of course by default mute is false. So if we want to provide the output, then it should be the other way around. Sorry for that, but that's what happens when you do these things in real time. Yeah, so now we basically have some basic functions to see if we can find objects, or see if objects are gone. Those functions will produce the rather standard output. The one thing that I want to highlight here is one of the most annoying thing that the Squish does, and that is whenever you're passing one of the objects from the names file to Squish function, that is used within like a testing function in log file, it will record the entire dictionary. It's actually worse than that because the names files, if you look at them, one of the parameters in the dictionary is the actual parent container. So this is basically a link to a second dictionary. So whenever you get a object name logged, it basically results in two dictionaries being expanded into your test log. I'd like to address it maybe a little later on because there are some things that we can do about it. But for now, like I've mentioned, we have two basic functions that that we can use. So, and when it comes to test automation and testing, from my experience, probably close to like 80 or 90% tests being done, it's either a presence check, absence check, or a check of one of the properties. So let's see if we can maybe create some kind of a testing function that will allow us for an efficient of checking of properties. And Squish basically allows you to, through object library, it allows you to gather the properties of an object. You can just call object.properties on an object that was found using our lookup function. I have moved the lookup function to test functions and imported it from there just to keep the readability of the code. But the function itself is the same as you've seen before. So if we call object properties on like any object name, maybe let's try to set up a breakpoint and run this code. It will basically okay, I didn't assign it to a variable. Great. Let's try that again. So that will result in a dictionary. You probably have to believe my word for it because it's so small. But you can do iterations over it. You can, of course, then by doing iterations, you can find the property that you're looking for. For instance, I've created a definition of the function here that would be a property check. We would want to specify, of course, object name of the functions that we want to look for. We would want to specify the property that we're looking for and the value for the property that we want to check. And as I mentioned, you can absolutely use object properties from Squish, but basically the only upside of it compared to looking through just the properties of the object normally is that it comes in the form of a dictionary. And in this case, I don't think that's really necessary. We can do it easier with Python. We can basically check if our object has an attribute that we're looking for. And so we're looking for the expected property attribute. And if it does, then we can basically check the value by using the getRat on it. What that will do, it's basically this will basically return the value of the property if it's there. So once we have it, all that we have to do is basically have to check if our value equals our expected value, and then we can just log the information that value was as expected. Otherwise, of course, sorry, that should be a pass. Otherwise, of course, if the value is not what we have expected, then we would want to fail the test case. And now we would want to, of course, return some additional information. So the value was our value return. And the expected value was something else. So of course, I think you know, and when you're encountering a value that you were not expecting, simply returning information that it was wrong is not enough. Adding this additional information into the log basically costs nothing, but can of course be rather valuable. And and of course, we have to check also that if our first check for the property being there fails as well, we should fail the test case as well with the information that the had no expected property. Yeah, so there's one more thing that we might want to make sure we're safe against, and that's basically the fact that the object is not known. As I mentioned, in case the object is not found, the function that I've created before, it creates a test fail. But based on the Squish settings, a test case that has failed can either continue or be interrupted right away. I think the default settings that I'm using here is that the test case in the event of failure would continue, and that's because because I have to introduce the safety in here as well. So let's just check if our object is not none. And fail the test case if it is. Yeah, so now that we have prepared the property check, and so let's see if our button, if its property name is equal to rooms. And by the way, let's see how well my live coding went. Okay, so we got the information, the value was as expected. So just to be sure, maybe let's break the test case by introducing the value that we're not expecting. And we can see that the test case has failed. The information that we've received was that indeed it was rooms 1 that we were expecting, but the value was rooms, so the test case failed as expected. One more thing that I like to do to improve the readability of the messages further a little bit is also to put the variables in some kind of a squares. I'm just using I actually don't know what the symbol is called, but by adding this to the message itself, I feel like that makes the object names stand out a little bit, and makes the output a bit more readable. Yeah, so when it comes to the tools that we have created thus far, now we have a really simple standardized absence functions, presence function, and we can do a really simple property check that will result in easy to read output. So maybe let's try to test something with it. I actually have created, again, a really simple function that will see into our application and into the items displayed by the application, and those are the rooms presented in the thermostat application. As you can see, a lot of those properties are exactly the same. So of course, if we do it like that, we can add each and every one of these items into the object map, and then we can check, copy this code over how many times to just a second, to see if all the information that we need is there. But that would basically balloon the test case to a really big size, and it would probably be pretty hard to maintain in the future. As you can see, I did this check just to see if our rooms button is called indeed, it's indeed called rooms. So if you want to do a check for those items, as I mentioned, you can add all of them to the object map. But in this case, this is more or less a list that can be dynamic. So that means that it can have more than 6 items. What if it would have like 20 or 40 or 60? Then it would be really problematic to basically add it to object map and do static testing on it. And that's why in this case, I think it's much better to basically mm, list every object of this type and then do operations on it. But before we do it, I wanted to get back to what I mentioned before. As you can see, the output that my test case creates is, as I mentioned, it's kind of hard to read because it involves printing the entire dictionaries, and this is because of how Squish works. But there is something we can do to mitigate this. If I go to my testing functions and look for my object lookup functions, it's right there. It takes a dictionary by default. So what we can do is we can give the user an option to add something else here, and we can kind of exploit the object map being a module here. So in order to do it, as I mentioned, just give me a second to adjust. So we can check if our object name is an instance of dictionary, and if it is, we can just do same as we did. We just call wait for object on it. But we can also give an user an option to provide a string name, and if we will feed this function name from the dictionary in form of a string, we can, let me just see if I have names imported. I do. We can do sorry, that was too fast, I guess. Of course, we want to do the check we want to do here is to check if this is a string and not dictionary. And if it is, then we can call our wait for object by getting our dictionary directly from the names. Yeah. So now if I go back to this test case and I will change the provided um, the provided names to just the strings of them. Now you can see that the tests work the same. Underneath the entire dictionary is provided, but for logging, simple friendly name is used, and that is way more efficient and easier to read than what Squish does by default, and that is printing the entire dictionary. Yeah, so that was that. And as I mentioned, we can do coming back to the test case that I was talking about before. We can do a property check on our first item, that would be living room. So let's see if its floor is first, if the room item, the energy level is 12, and that the humidity is 32. Yeah, so that worked, of course, because those are the correct values. But as I mentioned, in this case we have 6 buttons, so of course I could add all of them to object map. I could copy this over, or maybe even create a loop to go over the object names. But I think in this example it would be better to just look at the application, look at the structure of it. As I mentioned, I don't know if it's going to be 6 items or 20 or what have you. And there are ways to try and look for objects dynamically that Squish provides. The only thing that they will require is basically having a parent item. As you can see, there is object type of grid layout, and that object is a parent of all of those subsequent children. So let me try and get it from my object map. I think I have it right here. Let's say we don't need this for now, and now let's try to find my object. That is the grid layout. The funny thing about replacing the dictionaries with strings is that in Squish IDE, Squish will still link it to the object map. I'm not sure how or why, but that just works. But anyway, now that we have the parent object, we can get all of its children basically by using the object library again. So we can do object children on our object that we already have, and that will result in returning a list of all of those objects, right? But of course, we do not need the repeater. That's not the item that we want to test. So we need a way of distinguishing those objects from the repeater. So of course, we can use one of the properties again. If we can find one that's shared by all of those room items and not by repeater, that is fine. For instance, ID is, ID would be a good candidate for that. So we can do, what we can do is to iterate over the children of this object, and for each one of them we can just check if check.id equals room item. If it does, we basically can do our tests on the object. So I will just reuse this code because it will be just faster. And now we have to substitute, of course, child for our child variable for the item that we're testing for, right? And now, if I disconnect from the application and run this test case, I think I've made a typo. Apologize. And of course, I did not call the. Just give me a second. I'm trying to figure out why that didn't work.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to take the time to tell you that it's almost 4 o'clock your time. So if you want to continue.
I'll be wrapping up really soon, and of course, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Just to answer my own question, I of course made a typo in the object ID. I just wanted to show one more thing, and then we should be okay.
Of course, I just took the opportunity to do a time check with you. Or am I bothering you?
No, you you do not. Yeah, I found another typo, and now we have variable before assignment. Okay, now I have some issues here. I will try to figure out those, but maybe not to not waste your time.
Carol, this is a real life scenario. So
Mhm.
this is what happens in real life, right?
Yeah, it would. Um, I have probably made some kind of a uh, some kind of. Let me just. Okay, now I have. I know where I made my mistake. Of course, the object lookup that I have created only supports dictionaries and string. And in the example that I'm doing, I'm going to be passing an object to it. So in order to make it work, I need to add a third option would be to in other scenario, I can just return the object that I got. And let's see if that fixes it. Yeah, that worked. And as you can see, with like 5 lines of code now and and some troubleshooting, real life troubleshooting, we've basically tested all 6 items with the 3 properties that they have. This, of course, can be expanded upon but the general idea is that once you have basic functions for the presence, for the property checks, then and standardized, then you have most of your framework covered, and the value that it brings is not only in that your report gets easier to read, or the test cases get easier to write, but also the fact that if you need to onboard someone into your project and someone new has to start using your frameworks, having this structured like that and available to use is also a value in itself. The last thing that I wanted to talk about here is that what to do if there is no property that you can distinguish your item based on, and that would be in this case, like I said, the ID was unique enough for us to find it. But the one thing that's if you're missing a property that you can differentiate object on, you can also use the information in the type column. The type name is kind of misleading, but you can do it using something called class name. And if you do a class name on the object, it will return this information being stored here. The class name itself can be quite extensive. The QML type 29 is actually a really short add-on. So what I prefer to do is to just cast it to string and choose that it starts with, well, in this instance, room item. And we can do the same tests again. And I've probably made another typo. Okay, let me just take one last look. Of course, I used object again instead of using child. Childish mistake, I guess. And again, all of the properties were checked. Yeah, so I think that's where we stop. I had a little bit more prepared, but I guess I didn't time it that right. And also sorry for the hiccups on the way. That kind of can happen, of course, if you're doing this sort of things live. But if there is interest in further looking into the basically creating reusable stuff for Squish frameworks, I think we can maybe think of about a follow-up in the future. But for now, that would be all that I wanted to present. I haven't really looked at the chat. Are there any questions that I should be answering at the end of the session?
I am checking just now, and in the meantime, I also want to apologize for the hiccup in the beginning when we did not have audio. There seem to be no questions, so let's give
Okay.
like a couple more seconds to see if maybe someone typed something, because there's a slight delay between what we're saying here and the live stream itself. So I mean, I don't think it was a problem that there were the hiccups that you were talking about, Carol, because again, this is real life. It was not scripted. Errors will happen when you do things live.
Cool.
So maybe that was also educational for our audience. And I am seeing no questions. But at the same time, I just want to highlight what you already said, the fact that based on the interest of people, we will be sending a follow-up email with the recording and everything. So if there's more interest, we can do a part 2, a part 3 maybe. I don't want to dispose of
Let's
your time, Carol,
let's
but
wait for the for the feedback
we take
first.
it one step at a time, of course. Of course. Fabulous then. I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and especially thank you, Carol, for taking the time to teach us something new.
Thanks for organizing that, and thanks to everyone who bothered to listen to it. I hope it brought you some value. And again, sorry for the hiccups. I hope I did well enough job of explaining what was happening to follow it. Thanks.
I'm sure you did. Awesome, everybody. We will see you next time. Ending the live stream now. Bye bye.
Thanks. Take care.